Thanks for joining Black Gay Table Talk.
I'm Dorian.
And I'm Keenan. Join us as we take you on a journey of discussion from two Black gay male perspectives. You'll join us on various life, social, and cultural discussions that are just as versatile as you'd like them to be. Get ready for authentic, heartfelt, raunchy, thought-provoking, and relatable shows that will make you happy to have us join you as a part of your podcast family. Again, thanks for joining Black Gay Table Talk.
Let's get to talking. Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us here at Black Gay Table Talk. I'm one of the hosts, Dorian.
And I'm Keenan.
Let's get to talking.
Let's get to talking. All right. Well, today we are talking about relocating, making that big move. We're sure that at least somebody listening today has made that move from state to state. So just from our perspectives, we'll talk through or just have some dialogue around it.
Correct. Between the two of us, I think if our listeners listen to us regularly, they know that we are both transplants in our current cities. Me relocating from my home city of Chicago to Atlanta, and you?
Yeah, true. I moved from my home city in Memphis to, outside of Chicago.
Okay.
The Chicagoland area.
Now, I'm going to laugh at that, and he knows why I'm laughing about that. Because we have a tug of war going, but okay, you live outside of Chicago.
Yes.
I'm going to take it and we're going to continue our conversation.
I'll say it. So I have this thing. I know I'm outside of Chicago, or I'm like an hour away, or whatever that looks like, but I don't say I'm from Chicago, or I live in Chicago, rather. I say, well, I live outside of Chicago. And so
well, why don't you put an adjective on there and explaining that you live a long way outside of Chicago? So the listeners, because when you think of outside of Chicago for us fellow Chicagoans, I'm thinking Evergreen Park, Oak Park, Maywood, Oak Lawn, Harvey. And the reality is you don't live nowhere near none of those either. So you can say you live outside of Harvey. Okay, let's go that way.
I like where I live. Look, give me the cornfields and the dairy farms all day long. Okay, I'm good with it.
So for the purpose of this conversation,
but I don't live like in the country though. Not in the country.
Okay. So for the purpose of this conversation, Keenan says he lives outside of Chicago, and we'll just leave it there. Okay. I really do live outside of Atlanta. I mean, literally to the point that you can walk into the city of Atlanta from my house in about 10, 15 minutes.
Okay, that's cute.
Can you do the same?
Not at all.
Okay.
Not at all. Walk from where I live to Chicago. Could you imagine? Could you?
If you start today, you might get to Chicago by tomorrow.
Oh, my goodness. But driving, though, it's not too bad of a drive. I like having that control over the city life. Like, for me, there has to be a balance. You know, so, but let me ask you, what prompted your move to Atlanta or the Atlanta area?
So for me, you can go back to my college days. I didn't want to go to college in Atlanta, but when I got out of college, I wanted to relocate. And at that time, I was in the military, and we used to do summers here at one of the bases in the Atlanta area. And I just fell in love with it. I really did. I enjoyed the culture. Of course, I loved the weather. I saw images of myself thriving. There were just a number of different reasons. It's far enough from Chicago, but yet close enough if there's, a family emergency where I can get home, whether I drive or jump on a plane.
How long is the drive? It's what?
Depending on the part of Chicago you going 2, I can honestly make it to my home from door to door right now. I can probably make it to my home in about 10 and a half, 11 hours. And that's depending on how many stops I'm making in between for gas and restrooms. That's pretty much a straight shot and not running into any major traffic
Yeah.
through a couple of the larger cities that I'm going through, like Indianapolis. If
Mm-hmm.
there's no construction, going through Nashville.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So if you can avoid some traffic, you can probably make it from my current door to my home door in Chicago in about less than 11 hours or less.
Got it.
But I'm from the south side of Chicago, so I'm entering through the south side of Chicago. Hence, I'm coming through the Indiana corridor. So it's pretty simple.
I guess my reason I opted to move because of opportunity. I was a realtor, and this was right around the time that the housing market took that hit. Real estate wasn't where I needed it to be or wanted it to be, and the bills needed to be paid, honey. So, we looked at opportunities. I looked at opportunities in other states and convinced hubby, which took some convincing. I mean, he probably kicked and screamed the entire way. I'm more that change person. So I knew we had to make a change, in order for us to get where we needed to be. You know what I'm saying? But yeah, I would say it boils down to opportunity. Oh, and then too, I will also say opportunity, and in my personal opinion, I think that at that time, living in this area was more accommodating for who I am as a Black gay man.
Okay, interesting to say the least, because I know the area you live in, and coming from the Chicago area, I was like, oh, okay, if you say so.
Go ahead.
As a native Chicagoan, I would say if you're gonna move to the big city, move to the big city. I don't say you have to live directly in the 606 zip code, meaning that's pretty much all of Chicago 606,
right?
With the last 2 digits being different depending on what area you're in. But I really, and we've had this private conversations. It's like, but we're near the city, really. You
True.
can attach to the city because if you probably name the place you live, a lot of people wouldn't automatically attach it to Illinois. So for me, I understand your reasoning why you say I live on the outskirts of Chicago, because that's to try to tell someone exactly where you live, they would have to go to a map probably to try to find it.
Or understand.
And
yeah, true.
Because also there is that city is used in another state, which has a larger name presence than the Illinois version of that city.
Okay.
So because if you would have just told me, hey, I live in XYZ, I would not think of Illinois that quickly.
Got it. Yeah, that's true. Now, let me ask you, do you know what I mean as far as this area being more accommodating for who I am or who I was during that time as a Black gay man?
I was going to ask you to explain that a little bit more in detail.
Yeah, so I have to be honest. I think that this is where that difference in diversity and that red and blue or separation, to be totally honest. I see more support, advocacy, freedoms, and tolerance here in this area for the LGBTQ community. And mind you, this is back during that time, 2009, right? So keep in mind, I was a board member with the Memphis Gay and Lesbian Community Center at the time. And there were still situations where our sign out front would get broken from someone throwing a rock or windows being broken. And you had that, oh my gosh, you had that period where our transgender community was suffering. And it was like for a minute there, when you turn the news on, you would see this person was killed or this person was brutally beaten. And a very dear friend of mine, a childhood friend of mine, God rest his soul, he was murdered. And I've never really talked about it out loud out of respect for him and his family. But the reason that he was murdered was because he was gay. So seeing all that and taking all that in, I think my spirit needed to be freer than that area would allow me to be at that time.
This is a good, not to divert from the conversation we're in right now, but this is another good topic. Do you think that the social class and the economic plays part of that? Because the area you live in, you have a lot more educated people, you have a lot more affluent people than the inner city of Memphis, I would assuming. Did you come from the inner city Memphis? Is that what you're comparing it to?
You know what? I did. I came from the inner city Memphis, but I wouldn't say that it was an inner city thing or different. It was just the a thing. You weren't accepted. I mean, the fight was still very present for LGBTQ rights in Memphis. So I don't think it was specific to an area. It's the general area, the Mid South. You know what I'm saying? At that time.
I don't. I still personally, my opinion, the gay community is still not accepted widely everywhere you go. So with me saying that, even here in Atlanta, you still are going to get some pushback. Yes, Atlanta is known. I call it the Black San Francisco,
Yeah.
but but there's still struggles here. And so to say you
There's
moved
still
to
struggles everywhere. I
right,
mean, the
and that's
struggle
what I'm
is
saying.
still
To
very
say that you
real.
moved to that particular area because it was a lot freer or accepted, I said you could have chose any place.
Yeah, I could have. Yeah. But for me, now mind you, so I did research. I did research. I looked at demographics. I looked at the job opportunities. I also looked at the housing market too. So I did my research and I looked at, and this is when I was becoming aware of politics and policy and what represents me, right? And that diversity of being in, I'll say it, a democratically led state is different than being in one of a Republican run state. Like,
Because we tease about that to each other. You know, I
yeah,
ran from a blue state to a red state, and
yeah,
you did
I did the opposite. I ran from a
right.
red state to a blue state. But it's just, personal preference, though, I have to say.
Well,
And then to my husband's family, they're in Illinois, a different part of Illinois, but they're in Illinois too. So that was a plus. So we were leaving my family to come and be close to his family now.
okay. Because I definitely one of my questions is why would you want to move to where there's snow and sub sub zero temperatures
Right.
at least 4 to 6 months of the year?
Yeah. You know what? I love the seasons. I love the seasons. It's, for me, something special about potentially having a white Christmas outside, experiencing a real fall, like, the seasons. That's I love all the seasons.
So Memphis doesn't have seasons, and let me
You're not going to
let
have
people
a
know.
snow fight in Memphis.
Okay, I know that
I mean,
Memphis has seasons, but I guess what I'm asking, you can see the difference now.
yeah. Hmm.
Okay.
Yeah. Now, do you see yourself moving back to your home state or your home city?
I will. I have shared this with my family, and not to be morbid or anything. No. When I come back to Chicago for my final time, I want to be, I would like to have already expired and be buried in Illinois. That I would like.
Mm-hmm.
Uh,
Okay.
or if nothing else, and I have not made preparations to go anywhere anytime soon, but even in the event of cremation, I want my family to possibly spread my ashes along Lake Michigan
Got
somewhere.
it.
That's home to me. And I ride and die for my Chicago. I love Chicago. I don't care what the news or the media portrays about Chicago. I just have a love that's undeniable for that city. And it has made me who I am today. But it also it has made me appreciative of my ability to move somewhere else that's somewhat similar to Chicago, but yet not Chicago. There's a lot of things that I do miss about that city, uh, but I can get quite a bit of it here too. I will tell you, opportunities here for me seem to have been greater than Chicago. Maybe I had just ran my course in Chicago. I was ready to go. And I'd always made a promise to my younger brother that by the time I was 50, I wanted to be out of Chicago. And once my mother moved into her current residence, I felt a lot more at ease leaving her behind, if that makes sense. She's still able to do a lot for herself. She wasn't in the inner city any longer. And I know things can happen anywhere, but I feel a lot more safer knowing where she is versus where she came from.
Of course. So what do you think, and let's go with the top three. What do you think the top three outbound states, meaning people moving out of these states, what do you think they are?
California, New York, and Illinois.
Oh, you're close. You're really close. So California, Illinois, and New Jersey. Well, according to NorthAmerican.com, moving services, they track the inbound and outbound moves. So the top three for 2022 were Illinois at 65%, California 63%, New Jersey at 62%.
So here's the thing with New Jersey. New Jersey is an independent state by itself, but it attaches itself to New York.
New York. Okay.
So and the only reason I'm not going to, because I don't have the facts in front of me, the only reason I would dispute that is because you have a lot of New Yorkers that will want to jump across the bridge and live in New Jersey and still work in New York because of rent and home prices.
I see that here where I live. A lot of my neighbors, they work in the city. Well, where I've lived, a lot of my neighbors work in the city, or, vice versa. People that I work with, a lot of them live in the city, even though it's like an hour or so away from the city. So that commute is real.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. So guess what the top three inbound states were? Now, I will admit I was a bit shocked.
I'm not. I'm going to say Texas, Florida, and probably North Carolina.
Ooh, Dorian, you got in for North Carolina. So the top three, South Carolina, North Carolina, Tennessee is number three. South Carolina is 68%, 64% for the latter two.
Yeah, North Carolina is just growing so exponentially. It really is. I'm stuttering on South Carolina. Beautiful state, a beautiful state, may I add. And got some nice, sexy looking men there too. But I don't see the growth in Columbia or Sumter or some of those small towns. So it's hard for me to fathom why you have such an influx of inbound going to South Carolina. Right. That's just me.
Right.
That's just me.
So what do you think is driving them? What do you think drives them? Like, we know why we moved, right? What do you think the top reason for people who migrate to other states is?
I think preparation for where they want to retire. I think economics plays a lot of it. Opportunity. Depending on where they're coming from, which we've already said, all three of them states have one thing in common. The weather is much milder there than they are in the three, other than California, which does have beautiful weather. You still, when you look at Tennessee, North Carolina, and South Carolina, you're looking at, you still can be on the coast. If you're coming from California, I'm looking at it this. You still can be on the coast, get you some coastal water.
Yeah.
And you still have somewhat moderate temperatures, maybe not as nice as California, but you still have some moderate, decent weather. And the cost of living is comparing apples to turnip greens. There
Oh
is
my
no
gosh.
comparison.
Oh my gosh. I will admit the cost of living here compared to back home, oh my gosh. It's ridiculous. But I'll say this, well, also according to the site there, it was noted that the highest concern with movers is with quality of life. That's the top concern for movers in 2022.
Okay. I have a question.
And all
Now,
this.
you've been in outside of Chicago for, do you mind sharing how many years?
Oh my gosh, it's been a minute. It's been
Oh,
like 13 years.
okay. Now, with that, what are some of the things that you really like about living where you do?
Well, I do like the diversity. Although, and let's not get it twisted, I do feel like Tennessee does have a lot of good people that want to do the right thing and lend a hand out to people. But I do just see that for some reason, tools and resources seem to be at a larger volume. And then I take that at, where this area is, there are more people. It's ultimately the Chicagoland area. So I would expect the opportunities to be greater. But to that point, though, I do see myself moving back home or, close to Memphis one day. And I would hope that I'd be able to bring back that I've gained and in some way help with where I'm from,
Okay.
help the community there.
What do you miss the most about home?
My family. Look, when I moved, I was sick because it was just me and my husband and our two fur babies. I was sick. My family, all of my family was in Memphis until, we moved my parents up and my siblings came up too. So having them here makes it easier. Now, when it comes to what I miss about Memphis, my family, my uncles, like, yeah, my my family, my cousins, because we were all, for the most part, close growing up. But I miss them,
Okay.
and I do miss the weather. I will admit, I will go ahead on record and say I miss the weather.
Okay. So I think for me, I can tell you I miss my family, but I think that's a given. And so I'm not going to even count that because that's a given. I miss the food.
Oh, now I didn't think about that. Yes, I miss the food. Oh my
I miss the
gosh.
food.
Yes.
I miss some of my closest friends still live there, and I miss having immediate access to them.
hmm
But through technology and speed of travel nowadays, we can always get together, and we always like to meet up somewhere anyway. And Chicago has a nostalgia to me because it's home, so I can drive down somewhere or when I come in town and just have flashbacks like, oh, I remember when I was a teenager, I did this, or, I don't
hmm
have those memories, driving around Atlanta as much. I mean, over the years that I have visited, yes, I can say, oh, I remember the first time I came to Atlanta, I went here, or, the first
Yeah.
time I, went to the underground. I do have that, but I don't have as many as I do
hmm
in Chicago.
That's what
Now,
gets me going home and seeing things look different. It's like,
mhm,
oh,
the
like I
changes.
remember it used to be there, but I don't, I don't have that memory to go by and see, you know?
Right. Now, give me, if there was one thing that you can just bring from Memphis, what would it be to your current hometown?
Ooh, that's a good question. Like thing, like a tangible thing, or
It doesn't have to just any one thing. I mean, it could be anything.
you know what? Nothing.
Wow.
Nothing.
Okay. Well, for me, you guys can probably figure I'm a foodie. I miss my Portillos. I do.
Okay. No, I'm good on that. And then too, I cook, right? So if I want me a good Southern meal, you know what? I'm getting in that kitchen and I'm gonna fix it. And then 9 times out of 10, my mom is doing it on Sundays anyway. Yeah.
Uh, I will tell you another thing. I miss Chicago transportation. I'm sorry, Georgian, Atlantans. The public transportation sucks here. compared to coming from Chicago.
Yes, I can see that.
There is public transportation down here, but it doesn't compare at all to the CTA. There's no comparison. So that would honestly be, if we remove food from the equation, that is definitely something I would love to have down here, the public transportation. Traffic does suck down here, but as quiet as it kept, traffic in Chicago sucks. So
it does. The traffic here is horrible. Memphis traffic was not, it's bad. It gets bad, but it's not bad. Now this is bad. Like, I miss the days of complaining about traffic in Memphis because it was nothing compared to here. All right, so I do have one more question for you then.
Okay.
What would you want to let listeners know from your experience to consider if they're thinking about relocating to a different state?
I think homework is the most important to relocating. And especially if you're doing it on your own, I think there's a difference when you're talking about my job is relocating, because depending on what level job you're in, 9 out of 10 chances they're going to find you temporary housing and they're going to somewhat get you set up for success. Yeah. When you're doing it kind of on your own, I think homework is important. Go down there and visit before you make that final decisions. When you do come down here, have more than one place that you're going to look at. Utilize your time and try to max out as many places as you can. Ask questions because you want to know about the neighborhood you're looking. If you're going to need to find a job, you should have started that before you even thought about moving there.
Yes, that's what I did. Yes.
You should have already thought about that before you even moved there. Preparation. I'm a planner. I plan. I plan to the point that sometimes, my peers get upset with me. It's like, okay, you're overthinking this sometimes, but I like to be ready for just about any scenario that can possibly happen.
Yeah, and we kind of have to be. I have nieces spread just about all across the U.S. like Texas, Florida, Baltimore, like Memphis, California, like it's wild. One is in Japan right now. I'm definitely pro-family, so I would love to be where my family is, or at least at some point centrally located. So whereas when the flow of family does come in, I get to see them, because
I get it.
No matter where everybody is, they all come back to that central place. You get what I'm saying? So
right.
Yeah. Well, I would definitely agree. Preparation. So the message for today, relocation does need some preparation. So do your homework. And in addition to what Dorian had to say, make sure that where you're planning to move to, it represents you and who you think you are. Thank you for joining us for today's episode. We hope you enjoyed. Again, if you'd like to subscribe, donate, and of course, any ratings we definitely appreciate. Again, thanks for listening to Black Gay Table Talk.